Hello and welcome to this pre-recorded event for Design Technology, Graphic Products, Controlled Assessment Marking Training. To help you get the most out of this feedback, you may want to have the following documents handy, as we will refer to them during the session. Specification, Coursework Mark Record Booklet, and the PM report. In this session, we will be looking at how individual sections of the Controlled Assessment Mark Scheme have been answered by candidates, and what the moderator is looking for in each section. Effectively, there are three different delivery models for the controlled assessment. These are outlined here. The most common submission is Model 1, where candidates will design and model as a final outcome their designed and developed product. Increasingly popular is Model 2, where candidates are asked to design a product that may be too difficult to make at this level. Hence, they actually make something completely different that is more manageable for a GCSE student. It should also be noted that topics such as architecture are utilized for manufacturing, but avoided for designing due to their complexity. Model 3 is often utilized when it has become apparent that a student has designed a very simplistic outcome and needs to bolster the manufacturing aspect of the work by adding a product to the item already designed. A point of sale, POS, added to simpler packaging would be an example, where the packaging is designed and developed, and the POS is added to extend the manufacturing skills. Candidates must choose a starting point for their GCSE controlled assessment from a given list on the Pearson website. The topics supplied on the website have been carefully selected to allow candidates to make sure their submitted work is appropriate to graphic products, and to direct students towards the design of a prescribed graphic product, as opposed to a product that would be more suitably designed in one of the other strands of the DT suite. The statements here stress the fact that making a model does not in itself make the product a graphic product. Hence, there would be problems with graphics candidates making models of tables or lights, as these are items that a DT-resistant materials candidate would normally make in final form. There were some problems this year with candidates failing to meet the requirements for the controlled assessment topic list. Some centres submitted work that was not selected from the suggested list on the website, pop-up cards being a notable example. Centres can self-check suitable outcomes by asking, is it beyond the level of expectations for an RM GCSE student to make this in its final, fully functioning form? If so, it probably doesn't meet the requirements for a graphic product. Failure to choose from the listed pathways will mean work does not meet with the requirements for high-level control in the controlled assessment, and the candidates will not achieve as expected by the centre. It is imperative that the work submitted for this part of the examination relates to the list suggested on the website. Indeed, candidates may well be considered to have failed to comply with the controlled assessment at all if a product is designed that is not associated with the list or related to the pathways. Click at this point to see the detailed list of suggested topics made by the board for these pathways. The centre should check the list on the edexcel website regularly to make sure that projects being undertaken comply with the broad headings offered. Obviously, changes within the outlined topics are permitted. The present list is accessed via the link shown and has been added to the end of this slide. The examples shown here are suitable for graphic products. Board games are presently listed on the website and are concept products, as they cannot be made in school using the mass production processes they would normally utilize. Packaged products, such as the package shown here, bottom right, are likely to be too simplistic on their own and would sensibly be reinforced with the POS display. The building at the bottom left is an example of an exterior of a building submitted through the architectural products route. Similarly, the interior design of the apartment at the top right does not require the exterior of the building to be shown, as there is enough detail in the interior. A concept model of a mobile phone is also shown. This is suitable as concept modelling, as injection moulding on the scale required for the real version would be beyond the limits of a GCSE student. Here we have a range of typical resistant materials products, which would be deemed as not being suitable as submissions for graphic products. All of them will function as intended in their final form. The shoe rack is designed to work inside a wardrobe, subdividing it for easy shoe storage. The horse tack box doubles up as a step and can be seen to work in the photographs. The guitar stand holds a full-size guitar and works as intended. The lamp also will work as intended, but in this instance, the centre may need to be careful with this type of outcome if it were a resistant materials submission, as it relies heavily on one manufacturing outcome, that being laser cutting. This is the case for RM outcomes as it is for graphics products. The personal organizer for hanging on a wall or door is a good example of more advanced skills being utilized in RM, with laminating being introduced, but still it remains as a finished final product, and therefore not suitable to graphics. Here we see a range of products that match expectations for submission through the concept design route. Board games, games controllers, POS and advertising, packaging and concept electrical product design. It could be argued that all of these would be mass-manufactured by processes that are not available in school, so should be modelled by a GCSE student. On this slide, we have examples of typical built environment products. These include a beach hut, a kitchen interior, street furniture and a youth shelter, and a shop exterior and interior. The assessment criteria are a series of best fit statements. We will look at work that fits into a variety of these statements, depending upon the section being looked at. We will endeavour to connect exemplar materials with the statements in various criteria, so it may be useful to have the assessment booklet available. In this section, we consistently see a medium performance, with few candidates really establishing the key issues to be considered that are central to the problem. Commonly, we saw spider diagrams, which established areas to look at, but failed to establish the questions that arose from those issues. Perhaps even more commonly, candidates did not demonstrate an understanding of the problems to be faced, but presented a series of generic answers to the expected analysis, which were more appropriate to a specification. Here we see an analysis attempted for a building, in this case a skyscraper, probably not the best or most manageable topic, but one that is permitted. The candidate has failed to exemplify specific problems, such as size restrictions, use, style and signage required. Instead, the comments read more like a specification, and rather a specific one at that. Comments relating to what materials should be used, or the fact that it should have specific window types, are not investigative enough, and do not explore the problems the designer will face. They are not without merit, however, and are assessed as being worthy of marks in the mid-range. Here the work is analysed much more clearly. The key sentences in the initial brief are exemplified in a clearly investigative way. The work avoids a jump to the answers, instead presenting a series of questions to be resolved later in research. The work does not cover every aspect one would want, but it is better than a mid-performance. The work achieves the top criterion, as most design needs are clarified. The example shown here is similar to the last. The design brief states that the problem focuses around the design and modelling of a package for Skittles sweets and a POS display. The work is initially rather specification-like, with decisions being offered about the key needs rather than raising them as questions. If this was solely the case, then 2 marks would be the limit for this section. However, the candidate offers a box in the top right corner, in which a summary of needs is reviewed. Hence, 3 marks are allocated. As can be seen from these examples, this section of the assessment needs some work to improve the clarity of understanding at this initial stage of the design process. All too often, candidates focus only on product analysis in this assessment criterion, often ignoring the analysis raised in the previous section. Many of the points raised in the initial analysis can be established through product analysis, especially when looking at a variety of products. Things such as typical bottle size, box labelling, logo applications, materials, manufacture, and colour use. However, there are things that cannot always be established through product analysis, such as typical user hand sizes or other ergonomic data, such as building footprint for architecture or component size for a POS display. Specific user group opinions cannot be established from it either. These should not be overlooked, as they often have a great influence over the starting points for the design work. A mood board like this is of little use in the research section, unless used to support product analysis. Usually, this will elicit no marks here. However, it may provide the designer with inspiration at a later stage, and who knows what benefit may have been derived from it. In this case, the designer has not used the mood board to inform any answers from the analysis. Here we have some insightful comments on the reason for the design decisions being made in the production or development of these products. It is a higher level skill to be able to reason why a decision was made for shape, colour or material choice, rather than simply stating or describing what is seen. This also allows the candidate to evidence both detail and technical knowledge. The product analysis of this perfume bottle focuses too generically on describing what is seen in the pictures. Little useful information is gleaned from the investigation, and there is too little that can be used to influence the writing of a specification. This is a low-level response, as the low assessment descriptor uses terms like superficial and insufficient information to influence the specification. Here we have an example of comparative product analysis. The candidate compares more than one product to assess what common elements are to be found in the design of the products. This also includes some useful information regarding ergonomics and the way designers have utilized sizes and shapes to assist in product use. This is a much better performance in this area than is usually seen, with candidates failing to relevantly connect measurements to their specification. Where rooms or whole buildings are to be designed, some information regarding the size of the footprint of the room or building has to be shown. Many candidates fail to offer this information, yet it is an obvious requirement if a sensible design is to be offered. The example here shows the starting sizes for a series of rooms to be designed in the development of an interior for a spa. The exterior is not being considered. Here, facts gained from consulting the target market are presented in a very mature manner, indicating the skilled use of ICT and going some way to supporting high marks in the communication section. The work presented initially appears limited in providing additional information that would support an informed specification. However, the candidate provides a very nice summary of the results, and this goes some way to clarifying what they think the user group would want from the product. In this case, an upmarket box of chocolates. The specification section is often a well-completed section. Lists are usually the order of the day, but the candidates must remember to justify the points being made and address all the issues that were researched and analysed. The Angry Birds POS specification shown here is a mid to low response. This is because there are a number of points listed that have no relevance to the design development itself. Things like cost would be relevant if linked to something being designed for mass or batch production, but simply to state it should cost £9.99 is irrelevant and unjustified. To state that it should be made out of strong materials is too broad. Does this mean stiff, rigid, hard-wearing? Having completed the research, what has the designer found out about Angry Birds? What are the essential colours to be used? What are the key images? This work lacks justification and real connection to the analysis. There is no mention of accessing the DVDs, space at the till, or any slogans or banners to be added. The candidate then goes on to redeem what would have been a low-level response by stating that it should hold 4 DVDs and specifies sizes and that it should pack flat. Here the candidate has produced a much more detailed and justified specification, and the work is not so descriptive that it might restrict the designer. There are sensible inputs regarding the packaging for the external graphics. User requirements are considered, as are size and style. The work looks as though there would be links to the research and, prior to that, the problem analysis. Obviously, this can't be ascertained from the specification alone, but would need to be considered alongside the analysis and research. In the design section, we expect to see a range of realistic detailed ideas. Realism is based around the relevance of the idea offered in terms of what is required in the brief. Detail often comes from the suggestion of solutions to the individual subsystems inherent in the design idea. Perfume packaging may involve the consideration of external graphics, the package closure devices, the internal support mechanisms, the bottle's shape, top, and applicator methods. Architecture too can have subsystems highlighted, perhaps focusing on the key architectural components, such as any external signage or key features mentioned in the specification. On the surface, this work looks relatively detailed, but on closer inspection, the designer offers a range of graphic applications to a rectangular box, which amount to color changes only on its surface. The work has additional information appertaining to the subsystems in terms of locking, opening, and constructional methods. Clearly, this alone would not be worthy of marks in the highest assessment criteria. However, we are then treated to 3 sheets of the design of the POS. A range of ideas are offered, with changes, constructional detail, and varying materials suggested. Given the depth of understanding demonstrated in the POS, as well as the application of the graphics and the box subsystems, it is felt that the work is worthy of marks in the higher assessment category. Note the use of clarification sketches and thumbnails to enhance the understanding of the subsystems, which are supported by additional comments of a more technical nature. In this example of a point-of-sale display, the candidate has offered holistic sketches of solutions. This presents a range of realistic ideas, but the work lacks detail, as the sketches do not demonstrate any understanding of the key needs in the designs by exploring design subsystems. The comments are generally explanatory, which add little to mark scheme requirements. This would be a mid to low performance. Here, the candidate has offered 3 different ideas for buildings. There is not enough detail for access to the higher mark categories, although some attempt has been made to link designs to the specification. There is no reasoning for or justification of design decisions. Hence, this is likely to achieve in the low assessment category. This is an improved performance in the design of architecture, with many subsystems being considered and the inclusion of some technical details. It should be noted that with more technically demanding design topics, a degree of missing information would be forgiven. This is a good performance in this category, and there would be additional sheets to support this work, so a high assessment is likely. This candidate has tackled an interior design project. The design tends to focus too heavily on individual components within the room. The room's style and use should be the focus of the design, and these components would enhance these aspects, but perhaps more relevantly through the development section. There are no holistic views of the room interior, and no understanding of how the final room would solve the problem set in the analysis or specification. Here we see a more successful approach to interior design, despite the topic being an animal enclosure for a zoo. The work on the interior provides some details of internal components, and alternatives are discussed. Research is applied and the specification is considered. But the viewer's situation does not change. There is no alternative to looking through clear glass panels. There could be a fundamental effect on the design if other access points were considered. The work deserves to be awarded more than mid-range achievement, but does not access the marks at the highest end of the range, given that a key specification requirement, the form and structure of the external aspects of the exhibit, have been finalized in one solution. However, it still achieves a high performance. There are clear statements in the assessment criteria that need to be addressed. Specification statements should be considered and reviewed, as should user group feedback. Reviews can be formalized at the end of the design process, but credit will be given for reviews offered during the process. Sustainability is often left out, and at the lower end of the performance range, candidates offer subjective opinions and do not reflect upon the specification. Here we have a similar method of presenting third-party evaluation, but this piece of work is difficult to follow, as the candidate has failed to add the scanned images of the designs being referred to. This would not necessarily gain any more marks, but the work would be better communicated. This example is a useful way of communicating third-party opinions, although the spurious numbering system doesn't really mean anything. This would elicit mid-performance achievement in this category. This candidate has failed to address the specification in their review, which is likely to restrict their progression through the assessment criteria significantly. The user has been involved, but comments need to be relevant and not superficial. Some of the comments relate to the presentation style and not the actual design. The comments presented by the designer are not enough to command a top performance, so the work can be seen as low level. This is a cleverly constructed review page. The work has the results of a customer survey of a set of nail varnish packaging, and the results are used to play an important part in the formulation of the decisions made by the designer. The review of the specification formed part of the questionnaire completed by the users. Sustainability formed part of the specification. It should be noted that the work is pulled together by the decisions made by the designer on this sheet. All too often, the development section shows candidates using development to show how the design will be made, without further design input based on the results of review and user feedback. Decisions appear to have been made about final designs too early in the design process, and further changes are not considered. Modelling, too, is intended to be used as a design tool, not just a practice modelling exercise. Modelling should test some aspects of designs. Reasoning for changes being accepted or rejected is required, as well as a summative conclusion. The candidate has evidenced the use of modelling to test the design of the selected shape for both the bottle and an integrated holding device for use in the package. Modelling is used thereafter to make minor changes to the bottle shape, but these are minor and further changes could be made. It is common for candidates to evidence modelling in the development section, but just as often, it is not used to inform design decisions or any changes to the model thereafter. One of the key aspects of design development is the understanding that there are changes to be made to initial concepts. Here, the candidate has linked onto a colour scheme and basic idea. The application of changes to the graphic is key in the design of this bottle and its external decoration, which the candidate demonstrates to an exceptional level. The work is then applied to the package, and further changes are considered. The work is consistently supported with decisions for the change, and by reasoning with statements that relate to the specification. Here we see a more technical application of knowledge based around constructional techniques and a variety of materials. Decisions about colour, fastening styles and materials are all summarised in an informed manner. Overall, this is a very good development section, although there are a number of missing elements. It will achieve highly in the top assessment criteria, but may not be at the highest level. In this example, we have evidence of the use of CAD modelling, where some changes are applied, possibly due to the modelling. However, we cannot be sure, as there is so little annotation. If this was the only development sheet submitted, it would elicit a very low level of achievement, as there is no evaluation and little technical application. This candidate uses CAD to show changes to the interior of an animal enclosure. But modelling changes little apart from colour changes representing the use of different materials. If this was the only evidence of development, then a low or mid performance would be awarded, as there is some application of technical information, materials, despite the very minor changes. This is an ideal section of point-of-sale modelling evidence. Two models are being reviewed to see which will perform best so that changes can be made, possibly using aspects of each idea to improve the final design proposal. The candidate would use the decisions from modelling to inform changes and move the design forward, considering individual subsystems and refining the design. Physical modelling can also be used to establish final 2D logo designs. Here, the layout of lettering is explored to establish the final logo for a perfume brand and packaging. The marks for communication focus around the application of a range of communication processes and the quality of their application. Obviously, the quality of application of ICT is usually a fixed outcome. Therefore, crispness, precision, and accuracy will be reflected through alternative hand techniques too. Work in the design and development sections should be considered when assessing communication. Communication marks are also gained from evidence produced in review and final design. This candidate offers a variety of communication techniques, from annotation to 3D modelling, sketching, and CAD. The work is worthy of a top assessment, perhaps adjusted slightly down for the lack of crispness in some of the sketching, and for the fact the CAD work is limited to font exploration and simplistic box shaping. It is, however, still a good performance. Moderators reported that there is much room for improvement in this section. Sizes are often forgotten, usually on a working drawing that is often shown as a simplistic external view with little constructional detail. or as an addition from a CAD drawing. Suggestions for the materials required to make the model are often neglected too. It is not very often that component drawings are made, either as additional working drawings or as exploded views. Here we are presented with information about the net of the box and detail of the POS. Although the working drawing is a little limited in terms of measurements, a cutting list helps support the work. Key information about the most difficult parts of the final design is left out, including creating the molds and vacuum forming the base. It is therefore unlikely that the top assessment criteria can be reached, so 4 marks are likely to be allocated. There is not enough detail to ensure the accurate manufacture of the key components, these being the base and dome molds. Here we see a candidate who has comprehensively offered the information required to manufacture the intended product, with the exception of the mold for the vacuum-formed base. The base itself is shown, but not the mold. This helps to justify the marks requested. It is also a requirement that the materials chosen to make the product are defined. If they are not on this page, it is possible that they have been justified on a final proposal page at the end of the development section. The candidate in this instance supplies comprehensive information about the materials needed through the use of a cutting list. This is supported by the presentation drawing and the key sizes listed on the previous page. The question is whether there is enough information to cover the manufacture of the required components and the techniques involved in the manufacture of the product. In this instance, it is felt that there is enough information, and a high performance would therefore be expected. It should be noted that a sequence is required in the planning documentation, but not specific timings. A common error is the failure of candidates to offer the detail needed in their statements, as in the example on the screen. Quality control is also a common issue that is not dealt with appropriately by candidates. It is common for candidates to identify where a quality control check would take place, but not to offer an explanation of what the check will be or how it would be carried out. This work meets all the criteria statements for the top assessment mark, although there are some slightly confusing and rather broad statements. However, they are clarified with further comments as to how the vacuum-formed mold would be made and how the vacuum-forming process would take place. The work is thorough enough for this level and would gain 6 marks. Here we are presented with a clear and understandable chart. However, the timings, despite not being needed, are totally unrealistic and do nothing but create a bad impression of the candidate's ability to plan a product's manufacture. For example, print out graphics, 1 lesson. Print stick graphics, 1 lesson. In addition to this, there are some rather vague statements such as create base and create key shapes. This lack of detail gives little indication of how the product will be made. And when we consider the manufacturing processes in the next section, ultimately leads us to the conclusion that it was quite a simple series of steps. This candidate has no timings, which is not an issue, as there is no requirement to offer specific timings at GCSE. However, the work is far too reliant on the use of very broad statements such as create the packaging and make mould for vacuum forming. The quality control is weak too. Whilst points have been identified, they are far too simplistic and lack any indication of how the tests would be undertaken. This is a low performance in this section. In this first section of the marking for making, we aim to assess the candidate's ability to use specific processes and tools in an accurate and precise manner. In particular, we look at the individual processes that are utilized. Remember that the construction of a 2D graphic that is presented through a specific design manipulation package is creditable as a making process. Issues that regularly cause problems for centers are to do with level of difficulty or a repetition of simple manufacturing techniques. The overuse of one manufacturing outcome, such as laser cutting or 3D printing, is likely to prevent the candidate from accessing the full mark range in this section. This is an excellent way of demonstrating what the candidate has undergone during the manufacturing process. It clearly evidences all the making skills and procedures, giving ample opportunity for the candidate to highlight difficult tasks. Here too we see an excellent example of the manufacture of a bus shelter and seating. It should be noted that upon reading this information, the moderator can clearly see that the candidate has used a significant number of manufacturing processes and techniques of a more traditional type. When looking at the final product, one might have assumed that an over-reliance on the use of CAM was in evidence, but this is not the case. This candidate has demonstrated a wide range of skills for a fairly complex product. There are a number of demanding processes being used here that would possibly be overlooked in the final product. The candidate in this case has made a very complex mould. This mould may not have been evidenced in the final design process, so could well have been overlooked as a manufacturing process in the final photographs. A complex and demanding product must be made in order to gain high marks. It is easy to obtain a good finish on a key fob cut via a laser. Not so on a product of more relevant difficulty. Quality of manufacture. The work here demonstrates a very wide range of processes at an appropriate and even more advanced level than required. The mould turned for the vacuum form dome has also been usefully evidenced. Quality of outcome. The final product is accurately made and well assembled. The components fit together accurately and interact as intended. It is an accurate representation of what is intended, and is made to a level of quality that looks very good. There is no reason to expect anything other than marks in the highest category. This is a complex net, and also involves the production of a moulded vacuum-formed tray. Note the extra credit given for the double wall construction and complex locking mechanisms. This is an outstanding piece of work. This work will achieve the very highest level. This is a neat architectural model. However, the candidate has placed a high reliance on laser cutting in the manufacture of components. And where this is the case, candidates will often fail to achieve beyond the mid-range for quality of manufacture. However, where there is some complexity in the assembly of components, and accurate manufacture is required so that components interact to form a whole product, this can be credited in both manufacturing sections. However, this model is unlikely to gain access to the top assessment criteria. Where significant laser cutting is in evidence, we must consider whether there are other skills in evidence. In this case, there is some use of other materials and processes, such as iron-on veneer and use of Photoshop. Therefore, this work is probably going to gain access to the top of the mid-assessment criterion. No more than 50% of product making should be carried out using CAM. We can see here a good range of skills, including the use of hand tools, Photoshop, vacuum forming, card cutting, and spray painting. The work in this case is likely to access the higher mark band, as it has detail and quality of finish. Quality of manufacture. With regard to the quality of manufacture, this product is entirely lasered or vinyl cut and should have no progression beyond the mid-range of marks. The candidate has produced interlocking components on the laser cutter, although the files have not been evidenced. It is difficult in this case to allocate above mid-range marks in this section. Quality of outcome. The final product is accurately made and well assembled. The components fit together accurately and interact as intended. It is a fully functional product. The product is not appropriate to the level of difficulty required, as it is too simple and employs few demanding skills. The work is of good quality because it was machine-made, and is again allocated mid to low marks. The work in the case of this candidate initially looks to be deserving of high marks, but further evidence in the portfolio shows that the only aspect manufactured by the candidate is the rather simple box. For demanding box construction, refer to the chocolate box seen previously in this presentation, and of course the manufacture of the label. Here, processes are limited to printing and cutting with scissors and knife, so this is unlikely to progress beyond low to mid performance. All too often, the candidates evaluate the work submitted in a summative way, failing to evidence tests to establish if they have met their specification criteria. It is even more unusual for them to justify and use the tests in their evaluation. Here we see tests being conducted for a perfume bottle. The results are recorded, but the tests are not justified. However, this is an excellent way of presenting the evidence of tests, and the addition of an extra column would enable third-party input. Here, the evaluation uses the results of the tests. The tests are again not justified, although they are linked to the specification. This is a good performance and will achieve highly. Tests are not obviously offered at first, with statements being made alongside a picture of the POS and simple opinions offered against specification points. These do not always form tests, but can be accepted as evaluative statements. The testing issue is, however, resolved with the very detailed field trials evidenced on the next page. Here we see the candidate has trialled the product in situ. These field trials go a long way to testing the performance of the product, and we see no reason to deny achievement of the highest level. I leave you with the following summary of what we believe were the common errors faced by the moderation team. Most of these are self-explanatory, but I would like to point out the common errors for centres submitting a controlled manufactured outcome, perhaps working from a given plan or drawing. This is the over-structuring of the practical work. Candidates have to make choices themselves about the use of materials and construction techniques. If templates are given, electronic or physical, then candidates will not be credited for these processes. Centres are advised to leave the choice of materials and manufacturing techniques to the students, rather than prescribe the products that will be made. The information will give you the opportunity to explore our result analysis service, accessing grade boundaries and Results Plus. GCSE English subjects and Maths are changing first for first teaching in September 2015, with first assessments in summer 2017. GCEs for a range of subjects are changing first for first teaching in September 2015, with first assessments in summer 2017. We have just published our specifications on the edexcel website. They have been published early in draft form to enable teachers to have early sight of our proposed approach. We are also running a series of launch events. Our draft specs and SAMs, as well as further information about our launch events, can be found on edexcel.com. We constantly look to improve the delivery of our training and appreciate all delegate feedback. Delegates will soon receive an email directing you to our online feedback form. The form takes no more than a couple of minutes to complete. Please take the time to let us know your thoughts by filling in this short form.